So there is an interesting psychological aspect to the conversation about wealth and freedom that we should investigate as well. And it's one that's immediately apparent to anybody that's done any sailboat cruising. And it goes along the line of this, that you've got your yacht and you've spent all this time and effort putting it together, and you get started and you go out and you go sailing and you anchor it someplace, row ashore, and you look at your yacht out there in the anchorage all by itself, and immediately the panic sets in. The panic about, like, what happens if I'm walking up to the store and the weather changes or the winds shift or who knows what. This is precisely what we're talking about here, the risk of wealth being a trap, not being something that gives you prosperity nor freedom, but something that further causes you to feel a set of imprisonment, even oppression. So if one has the courage to reflect on the relationship between freedom and wealth in a meaningful manner, something that is discouraged by our culture, again, there's this basic assumption that wealth provides you freedom and liberty. It doesn't. Wealth is a means by which one can find prosperity, but it can trap you just as easily as it can liberate you. But using the sailboat as a thought experiment, over the years, having been involved in sailing for a long time and having gained some experience along the road, one's psychology about the issue can change pretty profoundly, and it's illustrative. Like when I first gotten started in the sailing world, I wasn't a professional boat builder. I was in a situation where I didn't know a lot about boats or how to build them or how to maintain them or any of the rest. Of course, I had to learn that in short order, but in fact, the sailboat itself represented a one-off purchase that I was able to make as a young guy. And even though it was an extremely modest purchase, it was all I could afford, and it expressed a one-time opportunity that was in fact represented, I guess, the completely realistic potential for, in fact, a unrecoverable loss. Okay, meaning that because I was not a professional, because I didn't create the value by the labor of my own hands, like, say, the boat, if I were to lose it, that would be the end of my prospects. And of course, that put me in a very different headspace than I am in today, whereby if I were to lose a boat, and let's make no mistake about that, losing boats is an omnipresent risk that mariners face. It's a very real thing that you think about daily, right? So like it's certainly not a trivial issue, but today, with the skills that I've got and what have you, even though that my boat today represents much more material wealth than my first boat, it doesn't impede my prosperity as much because of my skill set. Replacing this boat that I currently have would probably involve less risk and effort than my first boat, even though it expressed much less material value. So there's a super sneaky takeaway here, and that's this: that if you possess wealth that you did not personally create, or that somehow has come to you through means that, if the means were to go away, you would lose the wealth. If you're in a situation where you are not a first order producer of value of your wealth, well, that kind of wealth that's earned through either just fortune or compliance, well, that traps you a lot more. Because the fact is that anyone who, say, for example, builds boats can lose a boat with much less risk than a person who works as a tax attorney and goes out and buys a boat, right? So, for example, just to use the tax attorney as an example, someone who basically lives off of compliance and credentials, they have to be in a situation where they not only earn their living, but hoard for a period of time to acquire the capital to make the purchase for the boat and the freedom. But in fact, once they move into the boat, they lose the opportunity a lot of times to maintain that income. Well, it's going to be a lot more difficult for that action to create any kind of freedom or autonomy, because it expresses, well, exposure to an unrecoverable risk again, as opposed to an individual who literally makes free living their career, who earns their living in real time. I mean, it's just less of an issue if you can create your daily bread in real time for yourself in a multitude of different environments, habitats, and circumstances. In fact, your need for material wealth, if you are one of those kinds of people, is much diminished because your needs are being met in real time. The need to hoard is secondary. And there's tremendous prosperity to be found, tremendous freedom and empowerment to be found in living one's life in the latter manner. So that's basically the observation that has made my life the way it's been for, well, a very long time. I've just simply made the decision to acquire a skill set that easily earns me a decent wage in a pretty well turnkey, high demand set of circumstances. Work no more than part-time, because of course if I'm there's very little point in having the sailboat if you don't sail. So really no more than part-time, and then scaling my expenditures around whatever that sum total of income might be. If one gets a little ahead, you invest in tooling up, not to acquire or hoard wealth, but in fact to tool up to be able to earn a higher rate in real time. It's a contrary view, but it's worked out very well for me, and I think it's worth exploring. Certainly, I think most people will find that they can upgrade with skill set their earning potential far more rapidly than they can, say, hoard assets for some distant future. And especially in a world that's as turbulent as it is, becoming that indispensable first order producer of value who is in demand in any environment, in any economy, will lead to a lot more prosperity than strategies such as trying to hoard for some future that may never exist. Something to chew on real quick. Have a good day.